I'm here to talk about something very close to my heart. I spend a lot of time as an SEO working with devs, so we're talking about SEO for devs, how to make sure your beautiful website gets found. I'm Michael Ramsey. I'm the SEO manager over at Reprise Media. You can find me on Twitter at @Motronics. So if you get anything out of this presentation, what I'm really hoping is that you're going to know at least some of the basic pitfalls that will break your site in terms of SEO and how to get past them. So without further ado, we're going to move on. So what is search engine optimization? Just for anybody in the room who's not really familiar, search engine optimization is about making sure your website gets found on Google. And I don't mean by paying for ads, I mean just showing up in the regular results. So what does that mean? Take a look at some search results for large fridges here. All of this junk, people are paying for that. And as you probably know as a regular Google user, this stuff down here is the stuff that you actually trust. This is stuff that you really care about and you really want sites to be ranking down there to be the sort of trustworthy place that's going to get the majority of traffic. So SEO has two main areas. There's on-page SEO, often called technical SEOs. This is what the majority of people who work in the SEO industry probably do. Then on the other side, there's off-page SEO, often called link building. It's how do you promote your website so you get mentions and links online. For our purposes tonight, especially as developers, this thing will work, there we go, we really care about on-page SEO. We're not going to be talking about the off-page. So this is basically how you build and modify websites so that they are Google friendly. You'll get found on Google. So very quickly, just the basics before we get into the more interesting stuff. The very first thing you make sure you need to have is crawlable content. Going back, a classic example of non-crawlable content was Flash. 5-10 years ago, people made great looking websites in Flash. Nobody found them on Google. It just didn't happen. Secondly, there we go. Descriptive page titles and meta descriptions. The page title is the link that you're going to see in Google search results when your page comes up. The meta description, that's the paragraph of content after it. So this ends up being pretty important. So Rogers just launched a great new website. It's responsive, it's got pretty good user experience, and they apparently didn't talk to their SEO department. Ow! So, if this thing is going to work. Here we go. The page title for their shop is just the word shop. No, not the name of the brand, not any description of what they sell. It's literally just the word shop. And their meta description is nothing. They're just SEO, let's just forget about that. And so as an SEO, obviously you have a pretty upsetting reaction to having a website handed off like this. How did nobody talk to the SEO department? How did this end up happening? So anyway, moving on. Crawlable site structure, very important. It really comes down to having regular links. Don't make your site massively 50 links deep to get to any of the content. Make sure you use regular links in your navigation. Don't make it all JavaScript. And then good user experience in a light template. Now this isn't really a hard SEO thing, but at the end of the day, Google wants to serve websites that users like. The light template side of it is that you don't want to fill it with tons of junk code. At the end of the day, Google doesn't want to serve somebody a page that has 50 million advertisements on it and a ton of different template and stuff around the side and only a little bit of content down the middle. And finally, make it mobile friendly. One of the big things that Google's been going on about is the mobile moment. When does your mobile traffic actually go over your desktop traffic? For a lot of websites, that's last year or this year. So at the end of the day, if your website's not mobile friendly, and particularly in the last week or so, if you're not a mobile friendly site, you're not showing up in mobile search results when somebody searches on their phone, and that's where you need to be. Anyway, let us get on to the exciting stuff. So we're going to talk about three things. Modern and dynamic websites, why they pose problems for search engines. There's all sorts of really cool things people are doing with websites in the last five years or even more recently that are just not that search friendly unless you take certain steps. Secondly, the button will work. Semantic markup, how it can help search engines on your site. And finally, site transitions, a big thing a lot of developers are dealing with, that if you do it wrong, you can lose all of your search traffic virtually. Finally, we also have a bonus. We will talk about app indexing very briefly at the end. So let's talk about some examples of pages, or newer style pages, that have problems. So infinite scroll, we're probably all quite familiar with this at this point. Infinite scroll is a pretty cool way of displaying information. Lots of cards, you can randomize it, you can personalize it for users. At the end of the day, Google's not going to scroll your page. This comes down to it, Google will come to your site, it doesn't scroll. And so at the end of the day, you have to have certain ways around this so that Google will find the content on your site. Next, Ajax. We're all familiar with this little symbol right here. Google will run certain JavaScript now, but at the end, for certain situations, Google will not be able to find your Ajax content. Similarly, hidden content. Looking at Newegg right here, great listing for this motherboard. They've got specifications and reviews. Both of those tabs not active when the page loads. If the content is not displayed when the page loads, it's going to be something that Google doesn't like, because Google is a lazy user. Google doesn't want to have to do another click after landing on the page. And so if any content in those specifications or reviews would match a user's search query, that page is probably not getting returned. After that, Parallax. Life of Pi, this is a really cool Parallax website. Once again, you've got a whole lot of content on that page that's going to be basically split into different pages, but without some special means in place to be able to address that, Google's not going to be able to drop somebody into the second or third or fourth page of your Parallax content. It's all one page to Google. So, the most basic answer, URLs for all the content. So that's a really most basic way to look at it. If you can't access that content at a URL, then you need to do something so that that is possible. But to talk about some more specifics, other easy fixes to get indexed. So, non-JavaScript fallbacks. This is one of the most basic ways that search engines look at websites today. And particularly going back, I mean, it's the last couple of years or so, Google has started running JavaScript, but nonetheless, this is probably one of the easiest ways you can take a look and see, like, does my website have stuff in place so that search engines can crawl it? If you can turn off JavaScript, turn off images, turn off CSS, and you can still find the content on your website, it's pretty search friendly. Secondly, anytime now. Is this thing battery's going? Oh, there we go. Oh, we're going too far now. There we go. Push state. Push state, wonderful addition. So for stuff like that, that Life of Pi Parallax website, or say with Infinite Scroll, you can actually push a URL into the address bar of a user as they interact with a page that's otherwise dynamically loading content. Obviously, these URLs then need to return that specific content, but it means that Google actually has a reference point for a whole bunch of different content split out that otherwise would only be referenced by one single URL. After that, you've got link pagination. This is a tag that you can put in the top of your websites, particularly for something like Parallax or for Infinite Scroll, where you can simply say to Google, hey, there is like 20 pages of content here. Here's the URL for the next one, and the URL for the next one, and the URL for the next one. It gives Google a way to be able to look through and see where are these things located. Then after that, similarly, actual linking. So obviously with your Parallax site, you don't want people to be actually loading new pages, or say your Infinite Scroll or something along those lines. But you can use regular linking that will reference these different pages that will, if the user doesn't have JavaScript, that will actually work, much like a search engine. However, if you use prevent default, you can make sure that that actual like regular functionality of not loading pages just goes along as normal. And so all the users out there, everybody who normally runs JavaScript, will see the site just the same. But then when a search engine comes and looks at it, it's like, okay, here's the link to page 2, here's the link to this alternate view of some other information, and it will be able to find it. Finally, avoid hiding important content. This is a really pretty simple one. Right now, it's quite popular. There's tons of sites switching their frequently asked questions over to an accordion. Personally, I think it's a pretty good user experience. But at the end of the day, if there isn't pages for each one of these questions and answers, then there's nowhere for Google to be able to drop somebody if they search for something that actually matches a specific question and answer. You have pages with hundreds of questions, tons of valuable content, and it's simply not going to get served. This is actually one of these ones where I've definitely seen sites lose a lot of traffic because they go to an accordion on their new site instead of a broken out frequently asked questions section, and they literally lose like 50-60% of their traffic. So, moving on, Semantic Markup. Semantic Markup was a great addition to your repertoire of tools as far as building websites to be able to make it sure that search engines understand what you're giving them. So when we jump into it, once more time, here we go. So yeah, it's better for Google in particular, better for search engines, but it's also good for users, and you'll see why shortly. So to start off, obviously HTML5, big proponent of semantic markup. Back before HTML5, you'd have a page, you have a whole bunch of boxes, they're all divs. Search engine comes over to this, looks at it, and is like, well, I'm going to have to figure this out. I don't really know what this page contains. I'm going to have to analyze it, and maybe I'll be able to figure it out. If it's a standard WordPress template, probably pretty easy. You did a whole bunch of custom stuff, maybe not so obvious. HTML5 breaks it down into a whole bunch of actual logical references. Your header's called your header. Your article's called an article. Your footer's called a footer. Great for search engines to look at this and be like, oh, well, that's how your website's laid out. Very obvious. Moving on then, we've got schema.org formats. This is an additional way to get more granular about how you tell search engines what you've got on your page. So say we've got a listing for a business here. This is our standard, I suppose it's pretty hard to see in the back, but standard like thing, it's basically we get an H1, the name of the store, and then a little description of the store and the address and phone number below. That obviously Google would have to figure out what it is that's being given to them and decide, yes, this is an address. With microdata, we can actually apply specific information in all of the tags to tell them. It's like, okay, Google, this is a local business listing. This is specifically the name here. Right below it is specifically the description. After that, here's the address broken out into street address, address locality, what different region it's in this case Florida, and specifically the phone number. This is actually really important because your places in which your actual address and name of your company are mentioned are very critical to ranking in local searches where you see those little pins in the maps when you Google something. Now, we're going to skip RDFA, very similar to microdata, but we're going to talk about JSON link data. This was recently announced as officially supported by Google. JSON link data, and as anybody who knows their JavaScript will be very familiar, this is your pretty standard object. This lays out the same information that we were looking at in microdata, but purely in an object that's just shoved up in the head of the page. The nice thing about this is that it's something that you can hand off to your client, or you can hand off to the person who's handling the site, and somebody with more moderate technical expertise can do all of this implementation on a page-by-page basis using something like Google Tag Manager without actually ever interfacing with like the actual code of the site. So this is one of these nice things that lets you get around that thing where like you're going to have to bill a client a whole ton of hours to do a bunch of stuff that essentially somebody else could otherwise handle, because now it's no longer in the template, it's just something that's a tag on the top of the page. Finally, we're going to talk about social sharing markup. This, of course, is not directly SEO related, but it's very similar. So if you ever tried to share something on Facebook, you drop the link in, you get like a ridiculous image, doesn't make any sense, the description doesn't make sense, maybe even the link doesn't really make sense. Why did that happen? Because they didn't have open graph markup on the page. This is metadata that will tell somebody like Facebook, this is how you share the page. If you do have that in place, you're going to get a great image, you're going to get a nice descriptive line at the top, pretty much control how you want it to show in search, in social shares. The reason I mention this is that, of course, having your pages be more shareable means that they're going to be more popular, means that you're probably going to get more links, and then at the end of the day, you're going to be able to show up higher in search results. Similarly, Twitter cards, same deal as Open Graph, but for Twitter. You can control how your pages show in Twitter if somebody shares them. Obviously, the more popular your site is for sharing, the more important this stuff is to do. So what's the impact on search results of implementing stuff like schema markup? Well, let's take a look at ratings. We've got IMDb, My Cousin Vinny right here. These nice little star ratings, the number of votes, that's all there because of schema markup. Similarly, breadcrumbs and reviews. So we see like somebody Googling like the Roomba 650 on Amazon. Amazon not only has a 5-star, like I said, like 4.5 out of 5-star review here on the number and the number of reviews, so you know it's reviews and not just ratings. But they also have right along here a nice little breadcrumb trail, so that, hey, I just Googled the Roomba 650, but I'm interested in robotic vacuum cleaners in general. I can click through and go to that category as opposed to the specific product. Great way that you're going to get the click over somebody else. After that, click. Thank you. Recipes. So here we go. Super quick fish curry recipe. Another great example. This is one of the few places you can get an image in search results as recipes still. Recipes are, obviously a really big search field. So you can see in here, not only do you get a rating and you get the nice little image, but you get cooking time and the number of calories in the dish, all indicated right in search results. Once again, really going to make you stand out against somebody who hasn't done this for their recipe site. Oh, now it's working again. Oh, and now it's not working. Oh, here we go. Events. So take a look here. Once again, if you run events, you can actually have specific event markup where you can see somebody looking for Aesop Rock's tour dates. Not only do you get a website that tells them about that called bandsintown.com, but you also actually have a list of the next 3 tour dates that he has, what dates those are, what location are they at, all within the search results. So somebody doesn't have to go through and find it on your site. They can jump right into the specific page. After that, I'm going to move closer so I can click, I guess. All right, here we go. Software. That's something that a whole lot of us will probably get behind. There's a whole bunch of different information you can add for software. A lot of this is done automatically. Here you can see the game Muffin Night. It's available in the Chrome store. It's available on Android, and it's available on Steam. Each one of these has slightly different data from their rich snippet markups, their schema.org implementation. So you can see, like, well, what's the price? What is it for? In this case, Chrome. And similarly, like, how many reviews does it have? This is all, like, very specific information that you can give over a very generic listing. And finally, search and search. This one, so like say if you're a big e-com person, big e-com site, a lot of people are going to be searching your website. It's something they're going to want to do, and they're going to want to be able to get them there right away. So you can actually tell Google, this is where my search system is, and this is how you can input a query into it. And this way, Google will actually take the queries from this search box and direct them into your internal site search directly. So there's a whole lot of different ways in which that having this stuff in place will actually make a big difference as to when people will visit your site over the other listings. If you're setting it up, down at the bottom here, you can see if you Google a rich snippet testing tool or go to this URL, Google has a free tool that when you're doing this, you can literally copy and paste your site's, your page's code into that and see what it says as far as have you done your markup correctly even before you go live. Very good to make sure that you're actually doing it right. So let's move on. Avoiding site transition SEO drops. So you're all ready to launch your site. You're super excited. You're just getting ready. You go and you launch it, and it doesn't exactly work out as you expected. This is something that I deal with on a pretty regular basis. It's people coming to be like, oh, we launched this new website, and all of our search traffic is gone? Why did this happen? So there's some pretty simple things you can do that will take you through and make sure that you have a fairly successful site launch, that you won't lose a massive amount of traffic. It's pretty normal to see fluctuations. It's a new website, but you don't want to see that massive drop-off. So, very start of the project, you want to know what your top landing pages are. Go into your Google Analytics, go into your Omniture, take a look, where is my search traffic landing? If somebody Googles my site, organically comes in, let's know about all of the pages that get a notable amount of search traffic over the course of a year. Remember, you always want to take a look at a year because there's going to be certain pages that might be specifically seasonal. You might miss out that, oh, hey, these like 5 pages are super popular in December around Christmas season and they aren't at any other point. So you make sure you take a look at those pages, and then you're going to make a content transition plan. Does your new site have pages that are the same as these pages, or at least roughly so? If not, how are we going to get them in there? And how are we going to make sure that these pages are pretty damn similar to the old pages on the old site? Because if you change them up a whole lot, Google's going to look at it and be like, well, this is the same page. I mean, I don't know why I would rank this page for blue widgets when now it talks about red widgets. So after that, then you're going to want to talk about gauging new opportunities. Well, while you're at it, you're going to be building this new site. You're going to have lots of new pages on it. Why don't we make sure that those pages are what people want to find in search? This is the best time to incorporate new stuff. It's basically along the same lines as trying to identify your top landing pages, but you're going to be taking a look at like, well, let's build another page about this other topic or this other information that we know our users are interested in, and right now there isn't anything that specifically talks about it. After that, design elements. Once you get to the wireframe or the mock-up, going back to a lot of the stuff we've just been talking about, is there like a bunch of information that's only available via an Ajax request and there's no URL that references it? Then you're going to be in a position that you're going to need to find a way to make sure there is a place for the search engines to find that. Or similarly, like, did we do the right thing with our Parallax design? Did we do the right thing as far as like tab content, that we're hiding stuff away that maybe is pretty important? How are we going to solve that? After that, most importantly, redirect mapping. So you're at the point where you've got your URL structure and you've got like a basic mock-up or basic dev server going with your new site in it. You need to make sure that you have redirects mapped for at least every important page to the new location of that page. Ideally, you want to cover all of your pages. Because at the end of the day, like, they're all potential entry points with a few specific exceptions, or people could even have them bookmarked, and you don't want that one user ending up on a 404 page. Obviously, if you're dealing with like a 400,000 page website, you're doing a massive URL restructure where there's no way to automate it, you might have to make some hard choices about what do I care about and what don't I care about, but ideally, try to 100% it, that you have a one-to-one match for every single page across your site. After that, of course, you're far into the staging process. Your site's pretty much ready to go. Make sure you optimize it. Once again, going back to that Rogers example, did I simply not do page titles and meta descriptions? You might want to follow up on that. It's pretty basic stuff. Just make sure that you spend some time going over it. And then, of course, moving domains. This is a big deal. You've done your redirects, you've got your new domain, your old domain redirects to your new domain. At the same time, Google needs to know. There's an actual tool in Webmaster Tools where you can go in and be like, I am going to be moving addresses. Here's the information. here, and it's been done. You do that right after you've gone live, and that way Google will expedite crawling of the new site to ensure your new pages are getting served as soon as possible. One of these things, of course, the caveat being, if your server has a problem handling the load, like your big new site launch is going to be having like a ton of people coming into it, you might want to set specific crawl delay settings in your robots.txt because Google might help crash your server. But you should be planning for that nonetheless. All right, so that basically wraps up new site moves. And so finally, Google pretty new for Google these days. It's really only just recently rolled out. So say you are this recipe site, you have this great recipe for chocolate therapy cookies, and normally, you know, your website version comes up very high. You have a new app, so you can actually use a special API to tell Google where in your app certain information is located and how it corresponds to pages on your website. That way, if the person has the app installed, they'll get like a really cool little button to jump straight into the app from search results with no, are you sure you want to open this with this whatever application? And of course, it will give you probably a boost in certain cases where, as far as people who have your app will see your search results higher. This is a pretty cool new addition, but the specific caveat to that is that it has to be on your website as well as your app. If it's only in your app, Google doesn't care. Google doesn't want to be able to serve only app results. They want something that has a web page associated with it. And then that about wraps it up. So I got some information about contact down here, but otherwise, if anybody has any questions, please let me know if I've got some time. Oh yes, I can totally send the slides out to anybody that needs.
Yeah, the slides will be published on the website.
Yeah, absolutely. You can certainly get the slides. Over there?
When you say it's important that every single page has a specific URL, is URL logs as important as query strings or URL?
Okay, so query string URLs, Google can support them. You need to be very careful to tell Google which parts of a query string are actual, like, legitimate pages and which are not. If you have a system set up where you have a whole bunch of different ways in which pages can be modified, say like you have a whole ton of products and you have like 500 different filters. You don't want every single filter getting indexed by Google because Google's going to think that's spam. What you can do is actually Webmaster Tools allows you to specify which parameters in a set of parameters at the end of the URL are actually relevant to being a totally valid new page versus a redundant extra filter within that. You can also dynamically set meta no index robots tags for all of the pages that you don't want indexed. Like, it's pretty normal when I work with a large e-com client that will set up a hierarchy being like, okay, all of these filters are no index filters, and like the few of these ones are actually important variations on pages that we do want indexed, and make that choice at that time. So there's a few different ways to approach it, but the easy one is that you have the option to go into Webmaster Tools and be like, hey Google, this parameter, valid. This other parameter, not valid. I guess over here first.
XML sitemaps. Any comments on?
So your XML sitemap, if you have like under a 100-page site, it's on the end of the day not a big deal. If you're running a very big site, not only is it great for making sure that you are getting your pages indexed, but it's also a health check because you can get information about, okay, I submitted 170,000 pages to Google in my XML sitemap. Google reports back to me that it has indexed 130,000 of them, but in my total indexation graph, I have 4 million indexed. That's pretty clearly a problem. Either my XML sitemap is missing things, or there's a problem that Google's finding stuff that I don't want it to find. But if you're doing a small website, I mean, you should do it as not a, it's pretty easy with like modern CMSs to get that in place. But then there's still going to be like, it's like, well, Google can find my 100 pages. It's not a big deal.
What are the common errors that happen on the front end from front end developers?
Well, one of the common errors, I mean, really going back to Ajax and like hidden content. I mean, a lot of developers these days seem to love accordions. That's one of the things we've been hitting a lot recently, being like, oh, accordion this, accordion that, tab that, tab that, tab that. Or saying like sliders where you have a whole ton of information, a whole bunch of sliders. Those are some of the really common things that a lot of people are doing, and they're simply not looking at it. The other one being the Parallax, that Life of Pi site. They push state every single section. No next previous linking. Google doesn't even know that push state is there. And so they could be linked, they're just not there.
Yes, we just, in relation to that question you were saying, it's content that's hidden on a page, like the Ajax type stuff or internet type stuff. Does it get indexed in it's just hidden like styles, or are you just talking about things that haven't physically built?
Even styles. Like, so if you're literally talking that, yeah, like there's a div, it's like hidden off the page, you click a button, JavaScript pops it up, Google's like, I don't think users are gonna click. Probably one last question. Anybody else? WordPress. Well, I know my personal favorite is Yoast, the WordPress SEO plugin. At the end of the day, like, WordPress is very search friendly out of the box. What you're ending up wanting to do is, yeah, like install Yoast, make sure you do optimize your page titles, your meta descriptions, make sure you have good text content on all the pages, and then also spend some time, often what I'll do is I'll no-index tags as opposed to categories, because your tag system is very frequently redundant and is not very useful for Google, whereas your categories are much more likely to be unique entries as far as like sets of content. Beyond that, of course, your choice of theme can really push the one side or the other.
Right.
All right, thank you very much, everybody.